Kim will try to put it into the mix, but we've got to move this thing along. Thank
you
that's
fine.
For your understanding.
Can we talk offline?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, Se-Hun, I understand you do have some questions from the audience. Would you go ahead?
Yes, the questions come from our very own Faith McDonald. Question number 1. She asks, can Dr. Lin tell us which counties in Virginia have passed these bills? I would like to encourage for more. The second question is, regarding the yes on stopping tourism, is Google taking any responsibility to monitor or alert the authorities? Although she's not hopeful on that regard.
Yeah, good questions. Sean, over to you first. If it's a long list, maybe we can't do it justice here, but some examples of where you've had success?
Yes, I do have the information quickly. The Shenandoah counties, Frederick counties, Prince Williams, Loudoun, Buckwill, Warren, Spotsylvania, Madison, and Westmoreland, those 9 counties in Virginia. Regarding about Google's, actually, I don't expect Google to do any active roles because Google even hired so many Chinese people working at their so-called fact checkers. I don't think they're doing anything for this.
Yeah, well, and they're working with and for China more generally, of course. They've got a huge investment in artificial intelligence, I believe, among other things in China. Anybody else want to comment on how we might best be making known to people? I was particularly impressed. I think it was Susie who talked about. There was our friend Nina Shea talked about the possibility of using. Nope, I know it's somebody else, but remind me who had the idea that we can use insurance companies as leverage, assuming that there is a flow of information about who's getting these transplants, drying up, in other words, the market for these organs. Anybody care to comment on that?
I would like to comment. I think that's very difficult because of the medical privacy laws are constantly used in this area. And so that's why this is sort of, not saying it's a well-established plan, it's just something that occurred to me, is to try to go another way, because I know the FBI has been very interested in doing human rights work recently, and they've started to get very involved, particularly in the Uyghur issue. And it occurred to me that this is one area where they really could have an impact. Look, there's a misunderstanding out there that this is all done by sort of these shadowy guys in trench coats who come out and sort of say, I hear you have a problem with your liver and we can take care of that for you. That's not really the way it's done. It is done through Google. These websites are in English. They put out videos advertising themselves in English and to some extent in Arabic as well. They're really pushing the halal organ idea very strongly. They want the business. And so the best way that we can do it, I don't know what they're going to do about this in Saudi Arabia, probably nothing. But for us, we could track that stuff. We could, and it's a legitimate idea. And now I've got a phone.
You've got a phone call that you've got to take. Susie, this brings me to you. You, I think, mentioned biomedical data. One of the things that has been worrying to me particularly, and I think to our Committee on the Present Danger of China more generally, as reflected in a recent webinar we co-sponsored with Women's Rights Without Frontiers and Save the Persecuted Christians, is this social credit system as a vehicle for aggregating and mining and exploiting biomedical data. And there's some of us who are concerned that that may turn up here shortly in vaccine passports as well. But talk a little bit about how you see that, featuring in this industrial enterprise of the Chinese Communist Party, organ harvesting.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Look, I think it's it's this mass surveillance, isn't it? In the early days, I suppose it was easier for example, for Falun Gong practitioners to get out of the country, when we had sort of paper passports and this sort of thing. But the situation is completely different now, and talking about the social credit system and the sort of tracking and the tracking of people's every movement, really, private details, all of that. But also, you know, the situation with the Uyghurs and Falun Gong practitioners now, it's the surveillance is far greater, and the technology is far more advanced than it's ever been before. So in lots of ways, it just makes it, you know, their crimes even more hidden. And the sort of power the state has over the people in China is even greater. So I think you know, it's one of those areas where, you know, sort of tracking back to your previous question, we really have to take responsibility for that outside of China. We really do. You know, business and human rights obligations is something that people look at when they talk about forced labour, for example. But, you know, the universities and hospitals, the medical devices companies, just, I mean, the list is endless, really should be taking responsibility themselves at looking at, you know, who are they doing business with? They need to be sure, absolutely sure, that, you know, not one single organ is being used in any research. You know, we have an example, for example, at Alberta University, there was a situation there, and a professor of transplantation testified to the China Tribunal that, you know, a collaboration was about to take place. He was, you know, he should have been the person making the decision in the first place. He sort of found out about it at the last minute, and basically, you know, he said to the university, and he said to the TTS and the WHO, and this was through Professor DeMonico as well, you know, if it cannot be guaranteed that every single organ that's used is ethical, then we can't go ahead. It doesn't matter how much it's worth to the university, we can't go ahead with this, you know. And in fact, they didn't. And it's a fantastic example, and it's what every single university should be doing. So it's sort of, I think the two issues, you know, the fact that this surveillance is happening is another key warning that, you know, we really need to act. We need to move quickly.
Yeah. Lest, as you say, Susie, this all be normalized and proliferated well beyond China, quite possibly. Is there evidence, speaking of which, that the Chinese are trying to export this practice to some of the nations that they are now, well, I think of it as enslaving through their Belt and Road Initiative? Are they interested in getting not just halal donors, but donors that may be, you know, of a different ethnicity or race, for that matter, than those in China, in places like Africa or Central Asia, where they have now built this, speaking of industrial grade infrastructure, through their colonial empire building Belt and Road Initiative? Any
Yes, actually, sorry. Susie, go ahead.
Sean?
No, I was going to pass over to you, Sean, and Ethan for that one.
Okay.
Definitely.
Good.
Thank you.
Sean, let's go with you
All right,
first.
thank you. Because Frank, your question definitely remind me of my one experience in New York. One time I actually took a taxi, and the driver is from Pakistan. All right, he was really upset when I told him I was a Chinese, and he said, in Pakistan, even some of the young girls in Pakistan being trapped into China for marriage. It's a fake marriage, but those young girls from Pakistan were actually organ harvested in China, and then kidney lost, and those girls were sent back to Pakistan. It was reported in Pakistan media, and it created huge upset on the Pakistan's people, because Chinese government always say we have a very good relationship with Pakistan, right? But actually, the dark practice, the evil practice of organ harvesting already extended to other people. And so similar report I've been seeing regarding about the human trafficking, about, you know, fake marriages and tracking, seducing young girls from Vietnam and other Southeast Asia countries to China, and some of those girls are the victim of organ harvesting as well. And this also reminds me of my recent conversation with a very active Kazakh human rights activist, Saya Kajian, and he told me, you know, he has escaped to Kazakhstan, and then finally landed in the United States now. And he told me definitely a lot of the Kazakh people in Xinjiang area know that organ harvesting is happening in the so-called re-education camp or training camps in Xinjiang area, and they know there are not only just the Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and also some Falun Gong practitioners being incarcerated there, and they are subjected to organ harvesting. The people just disappeared, and they know very well the Chinese government are very, very. You can have a big appetite for halal organs as well. Yeah, so it's very, very bad situation. Yeah, it's spreading everywhere. If we are not stop organ harvesting in China, you can see this dark practice spreading all over the world. And you probably see in the last few years, so many movies, documents talk about organ harvesting now. It never happened before.
Yeah, well, it's needed, needless to say. Sehun, did we get a question from Christine Dolan or anybody else in the audience? I think we have time for perhaps one more.
Yes, we did. And I'm going, and just as a house rule, since we only have 7 minutes left, please answer these questions as brief as you can. So I will amalgamate all these questions together. Basically, the questions goes that China's transplanting plan effect to the Southeast Asia, including trafficking in person, also in the region is suffering on it. How can we prevent and protect the fundamental human rights on these people? And the question that we also have from Ms. Christine is that have any of you found links between laboratories working on bioweapons or even Wuhan lab and organ trafficking beyond the military link? And just to wrap it up, the other question comes.
I'm not sure we'll get to one more. Sehun, let's just see if we can get to. I think the second of those two is probably one that we haven't covered. Would anybody like to comment on the possible tie-in of what they're doing here on the organ harvesting with their biological warfare program?
Early on in the Uyghur investigation, started in 2008, 2009, I ran into several doctors who were outside of the country. They were in conferences, and I was able to interview them on a confidential basis. And 3 of them mentioned being told to go into the countryside, to very, very obscure areas of East Turkestan, really, really remote areas, little one-room schoolhouses, that kind of thing, and they'd have to take blood samples from all the kids. Okay. Each one of them described exactly the same story. They were in different regions. And I said, well, what's going on here? Why did they do this? And each one of them said it's for a bioweapon, some sort of genetic bioweapon. Now, I thought, well, that's my next book. It wasn't, because I went to some people I know in the intelligence community who really know, and they said, Ethan, this is a great subject for a book, and you're right, but you'll never be able to prove it. And I think that's a real problem, and it may not mean that much. I mean, anybody who's studied the Soviet Union knows that they've been up all sorts of insane biowarfare elements, and they were always getting them out of the lab as well, the same way we've seen probably with COVID. But I do believe that this is a real thing. Yeah, I mean, I believe they've been working on this for some time. Now, does it mean they'd ever use it? I have no idea. But failing, if China goes into a war, if China has some sort of global war, and people get distracted, I don't put anything past them. We're talking about 9 crematoriums sitting there ready to use. They've pretty much taken most of the Uyghur population outside of the country, aside from the U.S. and Europe, and brought it back into the country, either by people calling up and saying, please come home, your mother's in prison until you explain that you're not up to anything bad. And a lot of them were just taken across the border in buses with black windows. Now, what do you make of this? I mean, this is when people talk about genocide, it's such a dramatic term, and it's overused and so forth, and I get all that. But we really are on the edge of this here. Okay.
Absolutely. And Ethan, let me just interrupt you because we're hard out of time. Just to conclude on my part, I want to say, I think what the panel, Ambassador Bremberg, all of you have really persuasively conveyed is that we are looking at genocide. on an epic scale with vast implications both for the people most immediately involved, those being persecuted, those being simply trafficked for the purpose of, well, making money for the Chinese Communist Party, but also for the world because of what the Chinese Communist Party intends to do to the rest of us, as I think exemplified by this kind of conduct towards their own people. I'm fond of saying that any country that treats its own people terribly is not likely to be very considerate of others. Last point, I think, on the biological warfare thing, Ethan, I hope you don't give up on that. I think there's a lot more evidence today of what the Chinese are doing in this area, and those crematoria may have a lot to do with this effort, apparently, of the Chinese Communist Party to tailor biological weaponry to certain ethnicities for specific genocidal purposes. With that, I'm going to wrap up by saying, Se-Hun, thank you for your help in putting this together, as well as, of course, all of the panelists. A really important program, and I hope that it will be widely shared. Back to you, Se-Hun.
Thank you so much, Frank. And thank you, everyone, for participating in this very, very important panel. Just as we wrap up this program, we'd like to, as a public announcement, like to let everyone know of a very, very important development within the Committee on Present Danger China and the Captive Nations Coalition, in which I'm the director. Through main help of our Executive Secretary, Didi Laugesen, and myself, and also Frank as well, we have recently published a report on the Belt and Road Initiative. And some of the countries that are mentioned in our report covers a vast amount of information that has to do with the CCP's expansions all over the world. And the fact that we had this panel today talking about one of the most egregious aspects of the CCP's expansion in the world, namely the forced organ harvesting, believe that it was one of the most important, if not one of the few obligated things that we ought to do as people of the free world and as those who are standing in the morally right side of history. And so with that, we would like to ask everyone to please visit captivenations.org as well as presentdangerchina.org for more information. And again, we would like to thank everyone for participating in this greatly needed panel. And we hope that more action will be taken. Yes.
So can I make a last advertisement here?
Yes, please, go ahead.
This is for Dr. Wang regarding his newly released book in English. So I think it's a good concluding point too, if any of the audience want to know more about the evidence. So Dr. Wang has a new book called Ironclad, an Irrefutable Evidence. And so he has this book in Chinese and English, and also in documentary video as well. So these series of books, videos exposing CCP's organ harvesting from live Falun Gong practitioners in China is a collection of more than a decade of investigation by WOIPFG, and it includes recording of evidence from 5 committees of the Politburo of Chinese Communist Party Central Committees, and also the former head of the Health Division of the Department of Central Military Commissions, the Political Committee, the Legal Committees, the 610 Office, Courts, on-site witness, and also evidence from 45 hospital presidents, department directors, doctors from 41 organ transplant hospitals in China. So it's just a very informative resource that provides a comprehensive understanding and in-depth study of the CCP's crime of live organ harvesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we hope to see all of you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recording has stopped.
Thank you, everyone, for participating in this very, very important panel, and thank you especially to Frank for moderating this. Thank you, and thank you especially to Ambassador Bremberg. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
谢谢老王。
谢谢 Thank you. 谢谢了啊。
哎，不客气，不客气。
怎么样？今天还可以吗？
我觉得还好，还好。最后
好，用不到时间了。